Good afternoon. I'm recording this video for the International Research Awards on Leadership and Management selected for Best Researcher Award. Today, I'm going to present on the published article that is entitled Teachers' Perception of Leadership Styles and Involvement During the COVID-19 Pandemic Crisis. And this was published in the International Journal of Educational Research. Now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, educators had to move their teaching and learning to online platforms. Such a change was unforeseen and therefore became an educational crisis. In order to execute the change in teaching strategies, teachers expect a set of behavior and actions from their leaders to facilitate and support these changes. This survey used the Multi-Factor Leadership Questionnaire (MLQ) to investigate 124 teachers' views about their preferred and perceived effective leadership behavior and actions that would have supported them and the challenges they faced with their teaching during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. Literature will touch on the following topics. The COVID-19 pandemic resulted in 188 countries that closed schools, affecting more than 1.7 billion children, youths, and their families. The closure of schools might have disrupted the learning process of students and have more negative disruptions than it was initially thought. Although the use of technology became more necessary than ever, a lot that were utilized were untested and were improvised with trials and errors along the way. Most teachers had to change their teaching strategies midway into their semester without prior training or guidance of best practices or technical support. Amidst the disruption, the teachers felt unhinged, isolated, and directionless, at loss on how to get answers to their concerns about the cognitive, social, and emotional well-being of their students in online learning environments. In this disruption stage, it was crucial for educational leaders to step up and design innovative ways to quickly resolve the issues to support the teachers' transition towards teaching in an online platform and to protect the children's learning processes. Therefore, there needed to be crisis responsiveness to educational leadership. During the crisis, the school leader needed to make careful decisions when dealing with the community and must work towards fostering trust within the community. They had to make difficult decisions and communicate with teams to ensure that everyone was on the same page. At this time, helping teachers improve their professional skills became particularly important to leaders. This research is based on the multi-factor leadership model, which describes the leadership attributes associated with three different leadership styles, which are transformational, transactional, and laissez-faire leadership. The research questions that were discussed in this research were: Number one, what were teachers' preferred leadership during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis? Number two, what were teachers' perceived leadership in their workplace during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis? And number three, was there a significant difference between teachers' preferred leadership during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis and teachers' perceived leadership during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis? Therefore, the leadership investigated in this research will focus on the level of leadership involvement and the types of leadership style exhibited by the leaders. Perception of preferred leadership would reflect the teacher's expectations of their leaders, whereas their perceived leadership would indicate their actual experience of the leadership during the crisis. The research questions number 3 will form the hypothesis that there was no significant difference between teachers' preferred leadership during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis and teachers' perceived leadership during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. Methodology. A survey research design was employed for this study. The instrument was adapted from the Multi-Factor Leadership Questionnaire Form 6S, MLQ-6S, developed and validated by Bass and Avolio. The reliability scores for the MLQ subscales ranged from moderate to good. The respondents were teachers from various educational institutions and included those from government as well as private educational sectors. The Multi-Factor Leadership Questionnaire, Form 6S, collected data on teachers' view about leadership styles that would support challenges they faced during the COVID-19 crisis, as well as their views about their education leaders' level of expected and the exhibited actions and behavior during the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown. There were a total of 42 items, 21 items in each of the two sections. The two sections addressed the three main components of leadership behavior that were transformational, transactional, and laissez-faire leadership across 7 factors. I'll discuss a little bit about the main findings. The findings of this study showed that teachers generally expected their leaders to practice transformational leadership, which were elements of idealized influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individual consideration during crisis. During this period of crisis, teachers had high levels of expectations for individualized consideration from their leaders. They expected their leaders to be visible, provide help, guidance and solutions, as well as clear directions. The results showed that teachers wanted their leaders to act like transformational leaders during the COVID-19 crisis rather than transactional leaders or passive leaders. Most of the respondents believed that leaders should provide vision, used appropriate symbols and images to help others focus on their work, and attempted to make others feel that their work was significant. Findings indicated that the level of perceived leadership involvement across the board was lower than the preferred level of leadership involvement. The findings of this study implied that leadership actions and behavior that were exhibited by the educational leaders in handling the lockdown of education and the move to online teaching and learning during the pandemic were moderately low, and none of them had high scores. This research might also inform educational leaders to apply transformational leadership to sustain the educational process during a future crisis. The results also reinforced findings from other research that transformational leaders played a critical role during a crisis. However, the size of the organization, experience, and capabilities of the leaders the maturity of the stakeholders, as well as the availability of resources, played critical roles in affecting the leader's leadership style in approaching the crisis. As a result, most leaders could have displayed a more moderate style of leadership that could not meet the expectations to cater to the needs of the teachers' educational settings. Future research could replicate this study with a larger sample size that is representative of the population. By increasing the sample size, it would also increase the number of respondents from other teaching settings of different genders. Future similar research could adopt a mixed method approach using both quantitative and qualitative methodology. The survey methodology of this study restricted individuals to respond only to what they were asked, thereby limiting their views and opinions. In a mixed method approach, subjective feedback received through open-ended questions or including interviews of teachers from various teaching settings to elicit their expected and perceived actions and behavior of their education leaders could enhance the richness and depth of the results. It could also document in more details the challenges faced by both teachers and leaders in responding to educational change during the crisis. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.